Back in the 1950s, a single paycheck supported an entire household, covered the mortgage, and even left room for weekend outings. One vehicle sat in the driveway, and somehow nobody felt like they were missing anything. Fast forward to today, and two incomes barely stretch to cover the basics, despite both cars in the garage. We call it advancement, but sometimes it feels more like running in place, just with fancier shoes and bigger bills. A gallon of fuel in the 50s ran you 29 cents, roughly $3.48 when you adjust for inflation. Today's average sits around $3.15, technically less expensive. But here's what you've lost. The attendant who greeted you with a grin, cleaned your windshield without asking, and checked under the hood. Now you're pumping solo, swiping plastic, and wondering when courtesy became obsolete. The typical American dwelling in the 1950s carried a price tag of approximately $7,354, about $90,000 in modern currency. That bought real estate with a lawn, a garage, maybe even that iconic white fence. Today's median hovers north of $420,000, and don't expect a backyard to come standard. They still call it the American dream, but these days it requires more dreaming and significantly deeper debt. And they managed just fine. Expenses were modest, expectations reasonable, and nobody required 5 streaming subscriptions just to watch evening programs. Current median income exceeds $74,000, yet most people still feel they're chasing their own tails. Somehow, having more doesn't translate to feeling better. Evening meals back then featured meatloaf, pot roast, or tuna casserole, and you consumed whatever was prepared. These days it's delivery apps, dietary restrictions, and separate electronic devices. The protein's plant-derived, beverages are sugar-free, and the table typically sits empty. Existence in the 1950s moved at a gentler pace. Days felt quieter, expectations simpler, and the world seemed more contained. You're more digitally connected, yet harder to genuinely reach. Those simpler times weren't flawless. But when evening arrived, you understood your place in the world. We consumed water straight from the garden hose, and nobody questioned it. It was tepid, slightly mineral tasting, and captured pure summer essence. Modern children sip from $40 bottles with time markings and integrated filtration systems. Healthier for them, perhaps. But somehow, that old hose water still resonates in memory perfectly, especially following kickball games and ice cream truck chases. During the 50s, you walked to school alongside friends, textbooks in hand, protective gear non-existent. You conversed, joked, probably got into minor mischief along the way. Now it's SUVs, carpool lanes, and honking guardians. The commute's safer, certainly, but something magical existed about arriving on your own 2 feet. In the 1950s, baby announcements came through postal mail, a card with blue booties or pink ribbon, maybe a tiny photograph tucked inside. It felt intimate, and you displayed it on the counter for weeks. Now it's video presentations with pyrotechnics and theme music. Grander, louder, quicker, but somehow not quite as sweet as a quiet envelope bearing good news inside. You traded cookies, complained about crusts, and never encountered quinoa bowls. Educators in the 50s wore neckties and possessed paddles. You stood when they entered. If you misbehaved, they contacted your parents, and that consequence exceeded any detention. These days, classrooms feature cameras, therapy animals, and electronic communications home. I'm grateful children are safer. But goodness, when Mrs. Thompson raised an eyebrow, that was all the therapy you needed. A television set in the 50s cost you $250, approximately $3,000 today. And for that investment, you received 3 channels, rabbit ears, and no remote control. Now, $250 purchases a flat screen with 1,000 programs, and somehow nothing you want to watch. Funny how choice used to mean, what's on, and now it just means endless scrolling. Teenagers used to pass folded notes in class carefully written, sneakily delivered, and sometimes perfumed. A well-placed, "Do you like me?" check yes or no could alter an entire week. Now it's texting beneath desks, selfies and emojis, handling the flirtation. Quicker, sure, but a scribbled heart on lined paper still carries more impact. In the 50s, screen time meant the drive-in theater. You'd park your vehicle, crack a window, and listen through a tiny speaker while sipping a root beer float. Today it's tablets, phones, laptops, all glowing simultaneously. We still gather around screens. There's just more of them, and fewer fireflies outside. Air travel used to be an occasion. You dressed in coats, ties, polished shoes like it signified something. Even movie nights called for slacks and lipstick. Now it's sweatpants, earbuds, and boarding groups. Comfort prevails, certainly. But there was a time when looking your best wasn't about your destination. It was simply how you presented yourself. Calendars used to hang in the kitchen featuring tractors, puppies, or perhaps Betty Grable. You'd circle birthdays with pen and tear off the page each month. Now your phone buzzes with reminders you forgot to set, and every application wants to be your assistant. It functions, sure, but we never missed a dental appointment with a tractor on the wall. In the 50s, the milkman arrived early like clockwork. Bottles clinked on the porch, and cream rose to the top. He smiled, knew your name, and maybe handed you a lollipop. Now it's strangers dropping groceries from an app. Faster, sure, but you can't really converse with a hatchback and a barcode. A movie ticket in 1955 cost 50 cents. That's about $6 today. Now it's closer to 16, and that's before the popcorn. Back then, a night at the movies was affordable, exciting, and came with a cartoon first. Now, it's considered a luxury. In the 1950s, working from home meant you were ill or unemployed. Now, it's a lifestyle with video calls, pajama pants, and coffee breaks 3 steps from the couch. I'm glad folks have the option, but I do miss when going to work meant dressing properly and seeing someone besides your dog all day. Pen pals were genuine. You'd wait weeks for a reply, then tear open the envelope like it was Christmas morning. Neat handwriting, a pressed flower, maybe even a foreign stamp. Today, it's text messages and chat bubbles. Fast, convenient, but gone in an instant. There was something special about stories told one letter at a time. Everyone smoked in the 50s on airplanes, in offices, even in hospitals. Ashtrays were everywhere, and cigarette machines stood by doors. Now it's vapes and backpacks and smoke-free everything. Healthier, no doubt. But I'll admit, there was something cinematic about a guy in a fedora lighting up with one hand and tipping his hat with the other. Back then, the radio was your soundtrack. Big band, baseball games, and late-night storytelling. You tuned in with a twist of a dial and a bit of luck. Now it's Spotify and podcasts, playlists built by algorithms. There's more variety now, sure, but no way I will ever match the thrill of finding your favorite song by accident. The 50s gave you Leave It to Beaver. Wholesome, predictable, and everyone said, please. Today, it's Euphoria. Flashy, fast, and full of things that need explaining. Stories changed, screens got sharper, and plots got louder. But there was something about black and white TV and popcorn in a metal bowl that didn't need a warning label. Nobody wore seatbelts in the 50s. Kids rode up front, sometimes on your lap, and the only thing holding you back was Dad's arm. Now your car beeps, flashes, and practically lectures you until everyone's buckled up. It's safer, no doubt, but back then, a Sunday drive felt freer wind in your hair and no alarms chirping at you. A family road trip meant unfolding a paper map across the dashboard, singing along to the AM radio, and counting cows out the window. Motels had neon signs and coin-operated magic fingers on the bed. Now it's GPS, backseat tablets, and arguing over Bluetooth. You'll still get there, but you won't see nearly as much on the way. Sharing a photo used to mean winding the film, taking the shot, waiting a week for it to develop, and tucking it into an envelope. Maybe Grandma got one by Christmas. Now it's filters, hashtags, and 100 likes in 5 minutes. Convenient, sure. But that old black and white Polaroid stuck to the fridge that one stayed around for decades. Saturday morning was sacred. You poured a bowl of sugary cereal, parked yourself on the carpet, and didn't move until the cartoons ended. No pause button, no continue watching. You missed it. You missed it. Now kids have on-demand everything, but somehow it's not quite as exciting as hearing that theme song play right on time. We played stickball in the street, dodging traffic and shouting "car" when someone had to move the bases. Summer lasted forever, and dirt stains were badges of honor. These days, kids play online in dark rooms with headsets and avatars. The worlds are bigger, sure, but they're missing the magic of a cracked bat and real bruises. If you loved a song, you waited by the radio for it to play again, or saved up to buy the record. There was patience in the process. Now you just shout, "Hey Siri, play that one again," and boom, it's back. The access is amazing, but I'll always remember the thrill of hearing your favorite tune by surprise. A family vacation meant a packed station wagon, a cooler full of sandwiches, and roadside attractions you actually stopped for. You made it to the Grand Canyon with half a map and no reservations. Now it's flights to Cancun, Google itineraries, and Wi-Fi by the pool. Still nice, but sometimes getting lost made the best stories. Back then, if your car broke down, you popped the hood, cursed a little, and fixed it yourself. Or at least tried. Everyone had a wrench and a can of WD-40. Now, one warning light and you need a specialist, a reset code, and maybe a second mortgage. Cars got smarter and a whole lot less friendly. In the 50s, adults were respected without needing to earn it. If an older man said something, you nodded. Now, kids fact-check you on Google mid-sentence. They're sharp, no doubt. But sometimes I miss the days when, "because I said so," was a full stop, not the beginning of a debate. Shop class was a staple. Wood, metal, maybe even a little engine repair. You built birdhouses, learned the difference between a wrench and a socket, and left with splinters and pride. These days, it's coding boot camps and SAT prep. Useful, sure, but nobody ever fondly remembers debugging a spreadsheet. Coffee in the 50s was a dime at the diner poured from a pot that never ran dry. Cream and sugar, sure, but no one asked what kind of milk you preferred. Now it's $5 lattes with foam art and names longer than the order. I'll take my coffee hot, black, and served with a wink from a waitress. A handshake used to mean something. Trust, respect, a deal sealed without fine print. You looked a man in the eye and stuck to your word. Now it's digital signatures, dotted lines, and follow-up emails with "as per my last message." It's still business, but it sure lost some of the honor. At the grocery store, folks wrote checks and made conversation. The line moved slower, but nobody minded. Now it's beep, tap, go. And heaven forbid someone needs cash back. Convenience wins, I guess. But I miss the days when your checker knew your name and asked about your garden. If your bike got stolen, you walked the neighborhood, asked around, maybe offered $1 reward. Now it's doorbell cameras, online posts, and frame-by-frame breakdowns. Sure, we catch more thieves, but back then solving the mystery was half the adventure. And sometimes your bike just came back on its own. Back then, you collected bottle caps, marbles, and bugs in jars with holes poked in the lid. Every item had a story, a trade, a place in a shoebox under the bed. Now it's digital skins, NFTs, and collectibles you can't hold. It's still called collecting, but it's missing the dirt, the thrill, and the trade at recess. Getting your picture taken in the 50s was an event. Hair combed, collar straight, film loaded just right. You smiled for real because you only got one shot. Now folks take 37 selfies before breakfast and delete 36. The moments are more frequent now, but somehow they don't feel as kept. Kids used to say "ma'am" and "sir" without being told. You held the door, tipped your hat, and said, "Excuse me," like it was second nature. Now you get and "nah," maybe even a shrug. They're not bad kids, just raised in a world that forgot the magic of manners. Records were played with care needle down, static hum, and that warm sound filling the room. Then came tapes, CDs, and digital files. Now vinyl's back, rebranded as vintage by the younger crowd. But it isn't nostalgia. It's just music the way it was meant to sound. No skip button. Lawns were mowed with push mowers powered by sweat and determination. You smelled fresh grass, worked up a good lather, and earned your lemonade. Now there are robots doing it while you're inside watching TV. Efficient, sure, but the sound of a mower and a Saturday morning sun still beats automation. If you got lost, you pulled over, rolled down the window, and asked someone. Maybe they drew you a little map on a napkin. Now, your phone reroutes you before you know you're off course. It's faster, yes, but sometimes a stranger's directions came with a smile, a shortcut, and a story. You knew your best friends, your doctors, and probably the pizza place. Now they're floating in the cloud, and if your phone dies, you're out of luck. It's smart technology, until it isn't. Sugar used to be just sugar. You scooped it into your coffee, baked with it, and called it a treat. Now there's cane, beet, stevia, agave, and opinions on everything. Folks argue over labels more than taste. Back then, a cookie was a cookie. Today, it needs a food label and a debate. When the TV acted up, you gave it a good smack on the side. 9 times out of 10, it worked. Progress is great, but sometimes I still trust a firm whack more than a software update. You ate dirt, drank from the hose, and came home with gravel in your knees. Playground slides were metal, hot enough to fry an egg, and nobody had hand sanitizer. You just rubbed some spit on it and kept going. Now it's antibacterial wipes, foam flooring, and adult supervision. Safer? Sure, but not nearly as fun. In the 50s, a stream was a muddy little adventure where you caught frogs, skipped rocks, and maybe got leeches. Now, streaming means buffering in the middle of your favorite show. It's all digital and high def, but somehow that little gurgling creek felt more alive than any Netflix screen ever will. Teenagers learned to drive stick on real roads, not simulators. Grinding gears, stalling at stop signs, and learning when to pop the clutch was a rite of passage. Now, most can't parallel park without a beeping sensor. The cars are smarter, yes, but the drivers, let's just say, they'd struggle with Dad's old pickup. Back then, all a parent had to say was, "Be home by dark," and you were. No GPS, no check-ins, just trust. Now it's text me every hour, share your location, and a dozen apps watching your every move. Peace of mind, maybe? But there was something powerful about being trusted to roam. The encyclopedia set lived on a shelf in the den, heavy, gold-trimmed, and slightly dusty. If you needed an answer, that's where you went. It's faster, sure, but flipping pages by flashlight for a book report on Saturn, that's how you learned and impressed the teacher. Typing class meant clackety keys, sore fingers, and that terrifying ding when you hit the end of the line. You sat up straight and learned to type without looking. Now it's autocorrect doing most of the work, and sometimes undoing it. Back then, typos meant erasers. Now they mean awkward group texts and strange birthday captions. Doctors made house calls in the 50s. Black bag in hand, they'd sit on your bed, check your pulse, and ask about the family. You felt cared for. Now you wait 3 weeks for a video call if you're lucky, and the Wi-Fi cuts out halfway through. Progress, maybe, but that knock at the door meant something. A playlist was a stack of 45s next to the record player. You flipped them over, chose carefully, and maybe even danced a little. Now, an algorithm picks what you might like. It's convenient. In the 50s, your neighbor might show up with a pie just because. You didn't call, you just knocked. Now, the only surprise visits are noise complaints. I miss knowing who lived next door, especially when their cherry pie won first place at the fair. Talking meant face-to-face. Now it's blue bubbles, scene indicators, and read receipts that somehow hurt your feelings. We communicate more, but connect less. A good porch chat over coffee still beats any emoji. You memorized phone numbers like birthdays. You knew your best friends, your schools, and your grandmas off by heart. Now kids can't even dial their own without checking contacts. Lose your phone and you lose half your life. Toys were made of metal, wood, and real danger. Sharp edges, small parts, and not a warning label in sight, but they lasted. Now it's plastic, batteries, and Wi-Fi apps that stop working in 6 months. And did. A ball game played through a scratchy AM radio was enough to bring the whole porch to a hush. You could picture the crowd, the swing, the call. Now it's 4K, 10 angles, and live stats on screen. You might crash into a bush, brush off the dirt, and ride another mile. These days, it's full gear and warning signs. I'm glad they're safer, but part of growing up was learning how to fall and get back up. Meals in the 50s didn't come with labels. You didn't know the calories. You just knew Mom made it from scratch. Now it's nutritional info, sodium counts, allergy warnings. Probably healthier. But that tuna casserole with crushed crackers on top, no label needed. Just love and maybe a little too much salt. In the 50s, woke meant being up, dressed, and halfway through a plate of bacon. Now it means something else entirely, and tends to start more arguments than it ends. Language changes, meanings shift, and words get louder. But there was a time when being woke just meant your feet hit the floor. The bread shelf in the 50s had white bread, maybe rye if the store was fancy. Now it's a whole aisle of grains, seeds, and scientific experiments. Gluten-free, low-carb, high-fiber. Back then, 2 slices of Wonder and some peanut butter covered just about everything. And nobody needed a food label to enjoy it. Sunday mornings meant church, pressed shirts, warm hymns, and potlucks. After the sermon, everyone went or at least acted like they did. Job interviews meant a firm handshake, your best suit, and looking someone in the eye. You spoke your truth and hoped it was enough. Now you send resumes into a digital void and cross your fingers about picks you. I miss the days when people hired people, not software filters. If you wanted a toy, you saved up allowance, went to the store, and stared through the glass like it was Christmas morning. The toy might be fancier, but the waiting, the earning, the excitement, that was half the magic. People ironed everything, shirts, handkerchiefs, even sheets. The smell of steam and starch was part of getting ready. Now it's wrinkle release spray, a quick tumble in the dryer, and hoping nobody notices. No streaming, no signal. Back then, quiet was normal. Now it's called an outage. Politicians used to argue in suits, shaking hands after the debate. You didn't always agree, but at least they looked like they respected the office. Now they argue on Twitter, type in all caps, and block each other like high schoolers. I liked it better when grown-ups acted like it. In the 1950s, trolls lived in fairy tales and under bridges. Now they live in comment sections, faceless, nameless, and always ready to stir the pot. You used to walk away from a grump. Now you scroll past paragraphs of rage under a photo of someone's lunch. Not exactly progress, but definitely louder. Gas stations once checked your oil, filled your tires, and cleaned your windshield with a smile. You never had to leave the car. Now you're lucky if the pump works on the first try. The snacks are better sushi, lottery tickets, maybe a phone charger, but nobody calls you sir while topping off the tank. A night out meant the soda fountain, maybe a slice of pie and a song on the jukebox. You might split a milkshake with someone special and pretend not to care who was watching. Now it's food courts, playlists, and swiping on phones between bites. The music's still playing, but it used to feel more like a moment. Your phone in the 50s had a rotary dial, a shared line, and a spot on the kitchen wall. If it rang, everyone heard it, and sometimes your neighbor did too. These days, It's a pocket computer that never sleeps. We've traded privacy for convenience. And somehow, with all that tech, it still drops calls when you need it most. Cursive wasn't just taught, it was expected. Every school desk had a name carved in script, and signatures looked like art. Now it's barely taught and barely legible. Most documents are typed, signed with a finger, or just clicked. You might never need cursive again, but that capital Q still looks like a fancy number 2. Family portraits happened once a year. By high school, most kids could change a tire, gap a spark plug, and explain what a carburetor did. Now roadside assistance gets called before the trunk is even opened. Knowing how to lift a jack used to be common sense. Now it's a YouTube tutorial. Playgrounds had towering metal slides, spinning death traps, and concrete under your feet. You left with blisters, splinters, and bragging rights. Now it's foam rubber, rounded edges, and safety regulations longer than the monkey bars. It's safer, no doubt. But you weren't supposed to feel safe on a seesaw. Car keys were tiny, flat, and all looked the same. You kept a spare under the mat or taped inside the bumper. Now they've got chips, batteries, and price tags that make you wince. A lost key used to mean a quick stop at the hardware store. Now it's a dealership visit and a small loan. Privacy once meant closing the door and pulling the curtains. That was enough. Now it means toggling app settings, reading 37 pages of terms, and trying to guess who's watching. Nothing's truly private when every device listens. You used to whisper secrets. Now you just hope the smart speaker wasn't paying attention. Directions were shared by handing someone a paper map and tracing the route with a pen. You remembered landmarks, made notes, and asked strangers if needed. Now it's a live location in a group chat, updated by satellite. Now when the sneakers fall apart, you just click, buy again. Politeness wasn't extra, it was expected. You held doors, said thank you, and stood when someone older walked in. The manners aren't gone, just quiet. But you still notice when someone uses them. A long-distance call was an event. You scheduled it, paid by the minute, and kept it short. Voices echoed, and every second mattered. It's easier than ever to connect, but harder to remember when it felt special. Coffee came in percolators. It took time, made noise, and filled the kitchen with that unmistakable smell. Everyone drank the same cup. No choices, no customizations. Now it's pods, blends, froth, and preferences. You get exactly what you want. A sick day meant staying home with soup, a blanket, and reruns on the black and white. Nobody expected much, just rest. Now it means answering emails, joining meetings from bed, and pretending the cough button on Zoom works. You still stay home. You just don't stop working. If someone was running late, you waited. You trusted they'd show up. Maybe called their house if it went too long. Now you track their phone, watch the little dot move, and wonder why it paused 2 blocks away. It's helpful, yes, but it took the patience out of punctuality. A handshake was your introduction. Firm grip, steady eye contact, and a name that stuck. Now it's a QR code, a LinkedIn link, and maybe a 3-paragraph bio. You kept them in tins, drawers, and jars, and each one had a story. The memories are still there somewhere, but you can't flip through them during a thunderstorm with a flashlight. Every kid wanted a BB gun, a chemistry set, or a slingshot made from a tree branch. You built, broke, and sometimes got burned. Now it's consoles, touchscreens, and high-speed internet. Now dinner can mean 4 screens in 4 rooms and texts instead of talk. The food may be better, but the company was the best part. Diaries had little locks and secrets were written in pencil under your pillow. Thoughts were private, safe, and shared only if you chose. You still write your story. It just has a lot more readers.